Minecraft 1.21.9 brings us minor pack versions, new mannequin entities, changes to text components, and much more. Of course, it is also the Copper Age drop, which you can find out all about in my video about the gameplay updates. My name is SliceSlime, and this is a showcase of all the technical news. Let's start with pack versions. Pack versions for both data and resource packs now have minor version support. Minor versions of the pack formats are always forward compatible, and breaking changes are done with new major versions. This means things like added items will now be minor version changes rather than major ones. A pack made for a given major version will keep working on new minor versions, but may not keep working on new major versions. Your pack can list the major version alone for the minimum or maximum supported format of a pack, which means that the pack supports all minor versions on that major version. If you want, it is also possible to specify a minor version for the minimum or maximum. This also means the format of the pack.mc meta file has changed. This is done in such a way that the game will try to validate that the format is correct for all versions in the range that your pack declares support for. That means that the supported formats field has been removed, but is still required if your pack declares support for pack versions before the switch. A similar thing applies for the pack format field. It is now optional, but if the supported version range includes a version before the new format, the field is still required. There are two new fields for declaring the supported formats. They are min format and max format. These fields can be a single integer, which is interpreted as the major version number and all its minor versions. You can also specify a list of two integers, which is interpreted as a major and a minor version number. Similar changes have been made to the overlay entry format, where the formats field has been removed. But if the pack supports a version before the switch, it is still required for all overlay entries, even the newer ones. Overlays also now have min format and max format fields with the same formats as the one for the pack section. So let's get into the changes in Datapack version 88. Let's start with a new entity type called the Mannequin. They are a new technical entity, that is, they do not spawn by default and they do not have a spawn egg. They can only be spawned by commands or other technical means. A mannequin has the avatar of a player but is not a player. That is, it's a thing that looks like a player. One difference is that where a player would show a below score scoreboard entry, the mannequin shows an NPC text. It has no AI and does nothing, but it is a living entity and can hold items, wear armor, ride vehicles, have attributes and so on, and it has health and can die. The look of a mannequin is determined by its profile field, which has the format of a profile component and points out the textures to use for the skin, cape and elytra, as well as whether the model should be the wide or slim version. Before we get into the rest of the details about mannequins, we'll need to detail some important changes to profile components. The contents of profile components no longer change when a player's skin is resolved. That is, the item no longer changes whenever a download of the skin is completed, which could previously cause issues. This is now changed, so while skins can still resolve, the component no longer changes. And so a player head with a player name as its profile will now keep resolving to that player's latest skin whenever it is loaded. This type of dynamic profile is made by having either a name field with a player name or an ID field with a UUID, but not both. A name can also be specified on the top level. The resulting lookup will only be done in the game client once the item or block loads. You can still resolve a component ahead of time, which means fully filling out the profile details. This gives you a static profile which will never change and keep the same texture forever. Since this is no longer done by setting a dynamic skin, there is now a new command for getting the profile data called fetch profile. This command runs an asynchronous query for the skin data, and when that is done, gives you chat links for copying the profile data into the clipboard, getting a player head pre-filled, summoning a mannequin, or copying the profile as a text component. One thing to note is that item stacking is based on exact matches, so a dynamic profile component and a static one will not stack, even if they end up resolving to the same skin. Profiles now support local overrides of textures to use textures directly from resource packs. To do this, specify the textures directly in the profile object. This gives you three ID fields called texture, cape and elytra, which specify the textures to use. Note that this lets you specify different textures for Elytra and Cape, although the Cape texture is used for the Elytra if none is specified, as for players. Another difference with player profiles is that textures sourced from a resource pack are allowed to have transparency. There's also a model field, which determines if the profile should use the wide or slim model. All these fields are optional, and for any fields that are omitted, the data is instead taken from the profile. And finally, the profile field on Skullblock entity data now works exactly the same way. So with all that done, let's dig into the rest of the fields for the mannequin entity. Regardless of how the profile was selected, you can also set which parts of the outer layer should be shown using the Hidden Layers field. This is a list of layers to hide, with valid entries being cape, jacket, left sleeve, left pants leg, right pants leg, and hat. The NPC tag of a mannequin can be customized using the description field, which is a text component that gets shown below the name tag of the mannequin. It can also be fully hidden by setting the hide description field to true. The pose of a mannequin can be controlled by setting its pose field. The supported values are standing, which is the default, along with crouching, swimming, fall flying, and sleeping. And a mannequin can be made immovable by setting the immovable field to true. An immovable mannequin cannot be pushed or knocked back. And finally, the main hand of the mannequin can be set using the main hand field. There's a new type of text component called object with two different modes. The first mode is player, which renders a player face. This has two fields. Player, which is the player profile and works the same way as the profile item component and resolves the same way. The other field is hat, which is a boolean controlling whether the hat layer is shown, with a default value of true if it's omitted. The other mode is atlas. This component type displays a single sprite from an atlas, rendered in 8x8 pixel size for the current font size. That is to say, it's 8x8 pixels of the same size of pixel used for the regular text font. The component has two fields: atlas, which is the ID of the sprite atlas to use, and sprite, which is the ID of the sprite to use in that atlas. You can also add things in resource packs for custom things, and the contents of all the game's atlases can be dumped with the F3+S key combination. The run command click event has been expanded to work with commands that use chat when the chat window is not available, such as when chat is hidden or when a dialogue tries to run a command involving chat. Instead of this silently failing, a screen will now show that lets you insert the command into the chat window if it's available, or copy the command to the clipboard. And with that, let's move on to commands. The world border command now only affects the dimension it's being run in. World borders are stored and changed separately per dimension. The world spawn is no longer limited to the overworld only. The set world spawn command now works in any dimension. When the world spawn is in a different dimension, any commands ran from the server console or other such positionless entry points now run in that dimension instead. The spawn point command now also takes a pitch argument in addition to the yaw. Execute on origin and execute on owner now work properly regardless of which dimension the owner or origin is in. And commands that summon monsters now fail in peaceful worlds instead of successfully summoning a monster that vanishes a tick later. A bug causing some command errors to state "see below for details" without any actual details below has been fixed. Shaders no longer get stuck if you use the kill command on a player spectating a mob. And the spectate command can no longer be used to spectate entities that do not get sent to the game client, like markers. Fields that specify a target entity in a loot table, such as the entity field in entity properties, can now additionally target the target entity and interacting entity parameter types as well. There are two new loot table types. The entity interact loot table type has been added and has 3 parameters. Target entity is the entity being interacted with. Interacting entity is the entity that is interacting with the target entity, if any. And tool is the tool used to interact. There's a similar new loot table type called block interact, which also has the interacting entity and tool parameters in addition to block state and block entity for the interacted block. There are now also a number of new loot tables. The charged creeper/root loot table dispatches on the mob that was killed, which means the head drops from mobs killed by charged creeper explosions can now be modified in loot tables. Once any mob killed drops an item from this loot table, no other mobs killed by the same creeper will drop any loot from this loot table. The brush/armadillo loot table controls what is dropped when an armadillo is brushed. The gameplay/turtle grow loot table controls what drops when a turtle grows up. And drops from shearing a pumpkin are now controlled by the carve/pumpkin loot table. Harvest/beehive is for when a beehive is harvested, and harvest/cave vine is for when a glowberry is harvested. And finally, harvest/sweet berry bush now controls the berries harvested from sweet berry bushes. There are also news for a couple of loot functions. The copy name function now has new options for the source field, direct attacker, target entity, and interacting entity. And the copy components function now also has new options for the source field. This, attacker, direct attacker, attacking player, target entity, interacting entity, and tool. A data component has been changed. The block's attacks component no longer causes the item to be disabled if 0 damage was actually blocked for any reason. A block change in this version. The ID of the chain block has now been changed to Iron Chain. The interpolation of display entities driven by the teleport duration field had a chance of failing starting in Minecraft 1.21.5, which has now been fixed. And mobs now drown if their air value is lower than -19. Some changes have been made to the player data structure, where the respawn object dimension field is now always present. The angle field has been renamed to yaw and is now always present, and there's a new pitch field that is also always present. Let's talk about new game rules. A number of server options have been removed from the server.properties file and are now game rules instead. That includes PvP, which controls whether players can hit each other. Allow entering Nether using portals controls whether portals can be used to enter the Nether. Spawn monsters controls whether monsters should spawn naturally. Spawner blocks enabled controls whether monster spawner blocks spawn monsters. And command blocks enabled controls whether command blocks should work in the world. The default setting for all the new game rules is true. The spawn chunk radius game rule has been removed, together with the spawn chunks themselves. In custom enchantment news, explode effects now have a new field called block particles, which controls the particles spawned per block, much like the particles that were just added back for regular explosions. This field is a list where each entry has a weight controlling how often that entry is chosen, a particle to spawn, and then scaling values for positioning and speed of the particles. Speaking of particles, this pack version also introduces a new particle type, the Copper Fire Flame particle. Some existing particles have new parameters. The Flash particle now has a required color parameter, which is a standard format ARGB color. The Dragon Breath particle has a new optional power parameter. And the Instant Effect particle now also has a new optional power parameter as well. In custom world news, a noise settings field has been replaced. The initial density without jaggedness field has been removed and replaced with a new 2D preliminary surface level field. This is a function expected to produce the Y level of the approximate surface level. To replicate the previous field, you can use the new find top surface density function. Speaking of new density functions, there's also another new one, invert, that produces the result of dividing 1 with the argument density function. Setting the precipitation in a biome to none now properly prevents snow from accumulating. In Jigsaw-related news, the max distance from center field can now optionally specify different limits for horizontal and vertical axes. This is done by making the field an object with horizontal and vertical fields instead of a single number. A bug has been fixed with zombie villager variants and professions not being properly restored when they got placed using jigsaws. And another bug with the block age processor has been fixed to handle slab block states properly. In tag news, there are a number of new tags. The incorrect for copper tool block tag has been added together with collection tags for copper blocks, copper chest blocks, copper golem statue blocks, chains, lanterns, and bars. The copper tool materials and repairs copper armor item tags have been added together with the collection item tag variants of the aforementioned block tags. The shearable from copper golem tag controls which items can be sheared off a copper golem. The candidate for iron golem gift entity type tag controls which entities an iron golem will walk up to with a flower. And the accepts iron golem gift entity type tag controls which mob types it will actually give a flower to by placing it in their head slot. And finally, the cannot be pushed onto boats entity type tag controls which entities do not automatically enter boats when they get close enough. Let's move on to the resource pack news in resource pack version 69. Nice. Of course, this version contains new models, textures and sounds for all the added blocks and items as well as the copper golem. And there are new sounds and textures for the end flashes. There's also a new display transform for block and item models called On Shelf, which is used when that item is displayed on a shelf. A number of core and post shaders have been removed and replaced with a new core/screen quad shader. Vertex shaders for post-processing effects as well as light map generation and full screen blitz are no longer past the position attribute, and instead must assign vertex coordinates by GL vertex ID. These passes are now also only executed with 3 vertices instead of a full quad. And that's all the news in these pack versions. Thank you for watching. These videos take a huge amount of time to make, so I'd appreciate if you'd take just a few seconds of your time to click a like button. My name is Sliced Lime, and I'll see you next time.